Okay, I'm back talking about Ted Kazinski. I've pressed the wrong button on this camera and it turned itself off by mistake. So I've just been talking about Henry David Thoreau and Heidegger and their development of what I think is a version of the noble savage myth in cabins in the Black Forest and by Walden Pond in case of Thoreau, and how those and there's some similarities, I guess, in their philosophies. And the third one is Ted Kazinski, the Unabomber, who sent various letter bombs to individuals a few years back, and made the demand that he would, I think he made the demand that he would stop if his manifesto, this large document he wrote, would be published in a major newspaper. And I think it was published in something like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post. One of those American newspapers did publish it. I can't remember what happened beyond that. But that manifesto, which is slightly paranoid and slightly chaotic, and clearly partly the ravings of a madman, also has a lot of similarity to the philosophies you do find in Thoreau and in Heidegger. He doesn't talk about engagement. He doesn't talk about being in the world. He doesn't make reference to those kind of Rousseauian concepts. He doesn't talk about Dryden and noble savage myths. But he does kind of rant against technology. He does rant against, he doesn't call it the inauthentic life, but there's certainly an implication that the kind of life that technology brings and the kind of life that certain forms of social organisation bring, particularly to do with consumerism and ownership of certain kinds of property, that kind of thing, is very much something that he sees as a modern plague. And it's hard not to read a kind of claim for authenticity in his writing. So it seems to me that in all that writing, and by the way, just in relation to Ted Kazinski, I shaved my beard off this morning, partly because I didn't want to start thinking too much about Ted Kazinski and feeling too much like the Unabomber. So I've kind of civilized my appearance a little bit. But in terms of, where am I going with this? Well, I guess I'm just interested in the relationship between those three guys and the circumstances in which their philosophy evolved. I mean, it may well be that that they could have sat in cities or squatted by oases in deserts and come up with those philosophies. But it seems to me that there's something very interesting about forests and trees that relates quite well to that kind of philosophy. If you're in the forest, a number of things follow, I think. I mean, for example, when you're in a forest, I'm not in a forest right now, but I've got quite a few trees around me. If you're in a forest, you can't see the horizon. So there's no sense of being in this large open space in which one can keep walking. Because of course, as you walk towards the horizon, in the desert, for example, or on a beach, the horizon keeps moving away from you. So there's not that sense of openness and kind of availability of wide open space. And I know that, certainly some of those people I've mentioned had their cabins quite high up the sides of hills, so they would have been able to see a long way. But nevertheless, I think they are drawing on forest ideas. So that's the first thing, though, you can't see the horizon. Secondly, because you're surrounded by trees, there's constant occlusions going on. Every step you take covers something. You can't see behind this tree, and there's always something behind something else. It's a world in which lots of things are hidden and covered up, and you have to be kind of on your guard as a result of that. I think you have to kind of acknowledge the partial nature of your experience and the very particular nature of your experience. Related to that, I think, is in terms of this particular nature of your experience. When you're in a forest, things constantly moving into alignment around you. So even if it's not a forest I'm in right now, it's just some scrubs really. But as I'm walking along here, branches between these trees, as I'm looking for the trees, the branches are constantly coming into alignment with one another. So my position is located, it's kind of triangulated by a series of lines drawn through alignments of objects in the natural world is constantly being reinforced. So I think there's something interesting there about how that alignment works. And also my viewpoint here is extraordinarily situated. I guess this is the converse of that alignment thing. You know, as I'm, no one else can see these alignments of trees other than myself. No one can see the bark on this side of that tree, and that side, this side of that tree, and this side of that tree, in quite the way that I can. So, in terms of the kind of knowledge of my environment, it's uniquely situated and highly situated. So those are some things about woods and trees. And also this other thing I've mentioned, which is that when you're in a forest, or even just amongst a few trees, and you look up, I'll just put the camera down, and you look up, there's this kind of strangely unique up dimension going on, where all the trees kind of point inwards towards a kind of omega point above your head. And as you walk through the forest, all the trees seem to keep pointing upwards. So you're always in this kind of strange little cathedral in which you're standing at the altar, looking up the steeple or something like that, or looking in that kind of direction. And all the objects around you, the trees in this case, all seem to be confirming the uniqueness of that vertical dimension and your unique position right at the centre of that dimensional extension. What else? I think that'll do for now. There's probably other things to do with branching structures and rhizomatic structures and ground and all those kind of things as well. But it seems to me that in terms of noble savage myth and how it appears in Heidegger, Kaczynski and Henry David Thoreau, there's a useful correspondence, if not a causality, between some of the details of that myth/philosophy and the very particular phenomenological experience of the circumstances in which that kind of philosophy becomes foregrounded. I'm not surprised you come up with those kind of philosophies in those kind of situations.